We sat there and they gave us the score and we had 1 minute to look. And then when they say, okay, minute's up, start playing, then you start to play. I hadn't done it so much and suddenly I just blacked out. I could see it, I could kind of hear it in my head, but I was not playing the right notes.
If you're trying to learn notated music at the piano, then sight reading can be one of the most intimidating obstacles you have to overcome.
In sight reading, expect mistakes. They will happen, 150%.
It can be extremely daunting to open up a new score, see all of the details on the page, and have to somehow start your learning process. There's often a misconception that some people are good at sight reading and others are not. But actually, sight reading is, like everything else with playing the piano, a skill that can be practiced and honed.
This is something which has to be developed, has to be kind of cultivated and practiced, and you can definitely improve with that and sometimes get worse.
Even if it doesn't come naturally to you, there are tools and ideas and methods for getting better at it. And even if you're a sight reading master, thinking deeply about how you approach the piece on day one will make a huge impact to the rest of your learning process.
I mean, if you see the note, and then you find the note, and then you hear the note, that's really backwards. I always try to reverse that.
I'm Robert Fleitz from Tonebase, and today I've gathered the thoughts of several Tonebase artists on the topic of sight reading. The tips in this video will be helpful for absolute beginners and experts alike, so you're definitely going to want to stick around to the end.
Don't worry about wrong notes. As long as the rhythm is correct, people will sing along with you and the wrong notes really won't bother them.
But before we get started, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us to continue bringing this informative piano content to more audiences. And be sure to check out Tonebase Premium, the platform that makes videos like this possible. Several segments in today's video come from Tonebase community live streams, which are special exclusive events just for Tonebase Premium subscribers. These live streams allow some of the world's greatest pianists to be right there on your computer screen and answer your questions in real time. Be sure to check the link in the description below to get started with a 14-day free trial. Now, without further ado, let's get going.
I've found that my students fall into one of two camps. They either tend to be lookers, which I define as people who need to really look at their hands to see where they're going at the keyboard, or they tend to be readers, so they really stare at the music when they're reading and don't look so much at their hands. Lookers tend to be very quick memorizers. They'll internalize the score very quickly and then immediately start focusing on their hands. Whereas for readers, they tend to memorize a little slower because they're so quick at internalizing and processing the visual information. And this is relevant in sight reading because I find that lookers do suffer when it comes to sight reading quickly because they'll do this. And of course, they've lost all of that time in looking back and forth between the music and their hands. You need to train yourself to not need to look at your hands. And this comes obviously with time as you get more used to the piano. And what you should consciously do is start finding intervals at the piano so you can do them by touch and not need to look at your hands. If you can sight read an excerpt or a piece and keep your eyes focused on the flow of the piece as opposed to interrupting that flow and needing to find your place again, that'll be much better for you. So you can do this any number of ways. You can try to close your eyes in any particular repertoire you're doing. The other thing you can do is some of these piano warm-ups that automatically train you to get intervals in your hands. And I would say anything within an octave, you should automatically know where that is. So any interval inside of an octave, really just automatically know where you're going for that. Some of my favorite exercises for that are the beginning hand-in exercises. So for instance, number 6, finding a sixth, and finding all the intervals inside of it. And after that, you can try to find chord hand shapes quickly so that you can read not just single lines, but also chords quickly using your hands as a guide. There's always a reason for difficulty. It's not you. Of course, you can work at it more, but a lot of times it's just working with your brain and what it likes to do for each individual person.
A lot of times the biggest mistake people make is they play a wrong note and they stop. That's the worst thing you can do if you play a wrong note, in performance or in sight reading. The best thing they can do is play a wrong note, and not even react to it and just keep going. And actually, sight reading has an added benefit. If you practice sight reading, the added benefit is that it will help you very much when you perform pieces that you know and love and that you practice. A lot of people, they'll be sight reading, smiling, and they make a face or something. And when you're sight reading, practice not making a face. Practice just acting like, thinking, oh, yeah, that's perfect. The reality is that if you can start practicing not showing with your face or your body language mistakes, take that in your practice of sight reading where there will be mistakes for sure. So you'll definitely be tested on your reactions and your body language, and take that to your performance where if you play a wrong note, something happens in performance, you don't react at all. Because 9 times out of 10 for performances, if you play something wrong, the audience will not know unless you tell them it was wrong with your face, your body language.
We don't want to be playing hands separate from the beginning, because otherwise you're basically going to learn fur-elise for the right hand, fur-elise for the left hand, and then you're going to have to, again, learn fur-elise hands together. The biggest thing is training your eye to read accurately while training your hands to also read accurately, but in a relaxed and confident way. I want you to always take as tiny of a section as possible to accurately read. So for me, if I'm new to the instrument, it might be every 2 notes. So I find my registers, and I find my fingerings, and I have myself kind of in place, ready to try to work on this measure. I'm going to do 2 notes at a time so that I really am clear on everything that's happening. I'm going to think about it, and then I'm going to try to play it. Okay, I'm going to play it a few times just so I feel really confident, because it's a little bit awkward for me if I haven't played the piano before to really think about hitting that thumb and that pinky together and then having that independence of hand already, right? Because my left hand is doing 2 notes while my right hand does 1. Maybe I've been playing music for a while, so maybe I can do every measure, right? So then this whole measure would be... Okay, great. And then I practice that till I'm confident. How much can you look at and feel confident about reading and really accurately checking yourself on the score? The biggest thing I see happen when students start getting to an intermediate, late beginner level is that they always just start at the beginning and keep going. And, even some professionals fall into that trap sometimes, right? You sit down to practice and you start at the beginning and you play, then you start at the beginning and you play. What happens is the beginning of your piece feels really comfortable and really polished. And then as you keep going, it's less and less comfortable, right? And especially on stage, if you have a memory slip or you start to get distracted because someone in the audience coughs, right? Then you don't really have a basis of how to start in the middle. So not only are you training yourself to read really accurately, you're also training yourself to start anywhere in the score, which is really powerful, because then you can really have that confidence and that preparation for the entire piece instead of just having to always start from the beginning, which is what we fall into. You'll be able to start anywhere.
And pattern recognition is all about, when you look at a piece of music, understanding and seeing patterns that occur time and time again. So I'm going to pull up an instance of that in a Beethoven sonata. For a lot of people, if they were sight reading this piece, this Allegro di molto e con brio is the part that would probably freak them out, because it's rather fast, and there's so many notes. What do we look at? Well, here in this piece, we want to look at a few different things. The number one thing that I see as far as pattern recognition is the left hand. Just by looking at it, you see that the left hand has constant eighth notes, starting from here. And it goes all the way, basically, for most of the page. And you'll see that that is occurring. And then another pattern that we see is this pattern where the left hand will have. So that's another type of pattern. And just with our eyes, being able to see these 2 different types of notation, it's very important. And that's something that you want to take care of before you actually sit down and sight read a piece. is looking for that type of pattern. I would say that for classical music, Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert sometimes, but a lot of Mozart and Beethoven, particularly early Beethoven, the left hand will typically have lots of patterns that we can associate with. And again, throughout this piece, Beethoven will change the patterns, but we keep on seeing these similar types of patterns recurring time and time again. So it's important for us to notice that, and that really will help us when you're sight reading by just telling yourself, okay, there seems to be these tremolos, and then also this type of music that's. And that will get you a very far way right off the bat.
One of my teachers, Juliana Han, used to compare sight reading at the piano to the work that an actor does when they're preparing for a new role. When an actor receives the script, they read through from beginning to end, not worrying so much about how any individual word is pronounced or about their character's entire backstory. Rather, they're just trying to get an idea of what the play is about as a whole. What feelings are there? Where are the difficult sections? What is the full picture of the work? This is really helpful for us as musicians because it can be really easy to get bogged down in the small details right away. It's really important to actually go from beginning to end, make a huge mess of the piece, just get the gestures, the ideas, and then later when you actually go to learn the work, you can fill in the details. This reminds me of our video from a couple of weeks ago where we saw that the pianist Maria João Pires talks about a similar style of learning in her own process.
Gosto de sentir primeiro, de abordar, de ler com erros, de qualquer maneira, criar caos. Depois, pouco a pouco, o caos vai se recompondo, vai se organizando e as peças vão se juntando.
I speak from my own experience. I wasn't particularly great in my harmony studies, in the counterpoint studies. I wasn't able to do these, like write my own fugues, for example. But of course, to have this basic knowledge to understand the circle of fifths, how like these, typically how, let's say, a harmonic progression might go, like to know like a key's relation to one another, it makes it easier just for you to know, like, okay, now I'm in this key, now I'm in this harmony, so you can kind of almost imagine what could come next. It's a little bit like if you know the language of a composer, we spoke about like a harmonic progression, like what would make sense.
I was born with a huge eye defect, and I had 3 early surgeries, 3, 5, that was the early ones, and then I had another when I was 15. So when I had my surgeries, in the olden days, your eyes were bandaged. So one of the things that happened is I used to play by ear a lot, and I used to improvise, and I couldn't be dependent on the score. And it wasn't until I got many, many years later until I got my eyes kind of in a situation where I actually was a good sight reader. Nobody has to go through that to use their ears. I mean, if you see the note, and then you find the note, and then you hear the note, that's really backwards. I always try to reverse that.
I do think the ear plays a huge role in our sight reading because I learned Tchaikovsky concerto when I was, I believe, maybe 23. So it was relatively late, and it was one of those I'd avoided. I always said, like, yeah, everyone plays it, and I'm not really a huge octave player, so I prefer not to. And at that time, when I got the score finally, and I started reading through it, it really came very naturally almost because I knew exactly what was coming next, and it was in my ears for all these years. I mean, it's one of the most popular concertos. But I almost wonder if that's called sight reading or it's already there, so it's almost cheating,
Thanks for joining us today. What are some of your strategies for dealing with sight reading? Do you practice sight reading in your daily routine? Sound off in the comments below. I really love hearing from all of you. And if you haven't already, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us out so much. And finally, be sure to check out Tonebase Premium, where you can watch the full version of all of these lessons, join in our community discussions, and much, much more. Be sure to check the link in the description below to get started. I'm Fleitz from Tonebase, and I'll see you next time.